Good afternoon. Welcome to Foys on Facebook. Today is our 17th show.
What is the date today?
July 27, 2018.
Okay, that's important.
In case you wasn't sure. My name is Gina, and this is Jerry. And as always, we have Veronica behind the scenes. Today we'll be talking about NestBowls and nesting material. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. You can ask about what we're talking about. You can ask about anything else that has to do with pigeons. We have been doing the last couple of shows. We have been talking about the auctions that are for the Legacy Fund Trust, and we decided on doing them a different way from now on. So starting with our next show, which is August 10th, we're going to have our 1 hour show, which has to do with pigeons, and then we're going to take a 5-minute break, and for the next 30 minutes we'll be talking about the auction for that week. So you'll see the post on Facebook that will have the auction birds that you'll be able to bid on, and then that'll be an additional 30-minute show after our regular show. Once again, that's starting on our next show, August 10th.
And the reason we're doing it, we had a number of comments that there are a lot of viewers who really maybe aren't interested in that breed of bird that we're auctioning, or aren't in the market for any birds, so they're being forced to watch the auction, so to speak, instead of enjoying the show where we supply lots of information and answer questions. So we put our heads together. It took 3 of us to make the major decision, but I think it's going to be a good one. We continue to get some really good quality birds in, and after the regular show, for instance, after this show, it's not going to be this week, but the next show, 5 minutes after the show is done, which is 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 minutes after that, we'll start the auction. But on Facebook, we'll be announcing all of the birds, or whatever birds are going to be up for auction. Is that correct? And
yes.
Nothing else will change?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, we did have one question before we started. Is there a humane way to call birds?
Well, I'm thinking humane way to call birds. Killing is killing. Cull is a pretty word for it, I suppose, but there is, to my knowledge, there is no easy way. Now, it might sound, no matter what you do, it's going to sound gruesome, but I know the people who are in the squab business, the people who raise birds for meat, they have a killing knife. Funny, 40 or 50 years ago, we sold those knives and a holding cone. We now sell the holding cone. It's rather large, but it works. And what you do is basically you can make your own can, anything. You have a can, you stick the bird in upside down where its head's below the base of the can, and you'll need a sharp knife, small knife, or you could use a pick. Here again, no matter how I describe it, it sounds gruesome, but you open the bird's mouth. Up to this point, the bird has not been harmed. You stick it right up through their mouth, goes into the brain, and it kills them instantly. So that's probably the most humane way that I know of, although killing is killing. I wish I could give you more information, but you can't poison them. You could chop the head off. I mean, there's so many things, ways to do it. Another way you may want to, something else you may want to consider, it's a growing, it's not a business, it's not a field, area of expertise. I'm not sure how to explain it, but there are organizations that are rehabilitators. They will take any birds in and care for them and take care of them. So what would make a lot of sense is try to find a rehabilitator in your area. I think you can go online, and you go online, you'll find some. You may have to pay a little bit to ship the birds to these folks, but they're compassionate and they'll do anything to make sure the birds are comfortable in their retirement, or if you just want to get rid of them for whatever reason. Give you an example about the extremes. Laura has called me on a regular basis. She has a bird with a broken wing, and she got it, nobody wanted it, so she took it in. And she's doctored that bird, taken it to the vet many times, trying to do whatever possible to allow the bird to fly. These people take it very, very seriously. I know there are cat rehabilitators, dog rehabilitators, and there are pigeon rehabilitators. Rehabilitating means they're hurt and they want to help them, but they don't have to be hurt. In many cases, it's people maybe passed away and their widows trying to get rid of the birds, or for some reason you have a bird that just doesn't fit your scheme of things. Maybe contact a rehabilitator. Best I can do. And you should mention maybe that how they send questions into the show, or do they know they can do that?
Oh, they know they can do that.
Oh.
If you don't know, you can type right on the live feed and ask us a question, and we will answer it right here, right now.
We're in our warehouse right now. Different background. It seems like we have a different background every show, but I was talking to Veronica about this, I think yesterday. We have had suggestions that we give you a tour of our warehouse and our store, so that's still in the works, and we will be doing it, I'm sure, before the year is out. And I wanted to say, the people who were watching the show last week, I had called Gramus to do the show with me, and at the last minute, it wasn't his fault, he just couldn't make it. Gina took a darn vacation, and Jerry had to do the whole show by himself. And I can tell you this, it's not easy. I got comments from more than one person who said, geez, you look so darn tired or bored. So I can tell you, doing a 1-hour show all by yourself is not the easiest thing to do, and I hope I never have to do it again. So for those who thought I was boring or tired, I apologize. I was lonely. Do we have another question?
Oh, I did enjoy vacation.
Yeah, you're on the shore.
Can you please talk about biosecurity to stop spreading of the virulent Newcastle disease on the West Coast?
Is that from Cam, maybe? Yeah.
Yes.
Cam, why don't you do this? And I will talk a little bit about biosecurity. Cam is from Hawaii, very much involved in doing everything he can to spread the disease of a virus called Newcastle. As I said before, Newcastle is a chicken form of PMV, to the best of my knowledge. It doesn't affect our pigeons, but in the United States, in their wisdom, call pigeons chickens. So it's any rule or any thing that's done about chickens is going by the government is going to affect our pigeons. So Cam, why don't you send in some suggestions? We'll skip the question for now, and just list some of the things that people can do, and we'll certainly talk about them. Okay. Another one up there.
Sounds good.
We're going to do something else. Don't mind me. I don't run the show, folks. I just sit there. Go ahead.
Okay, we're gonna start by talking about the different types of NestBowls. We have several different types, and the first one is going to be the USA NestBowl.
And if you hear trucks and so forth behind us, that's because we're in our warehouse with a large door that's open, so we're getting a little bit of traffic noise. All right, this has been around for a long time. It's called a plastic, what? What do we
USA
call it?
NestBowl.
USA NestBowl. It's actually a dog dish, and if you wanted to go into a pet store, you probably could find them, but we sell these hundreds and hundreds of them. A lot of advantages in that it's very sturdy, very stable, won't move around, has these brakes in it. Here, that's to allow airflow underneath, but and it's really deep. That's probably the biggest benefit. Being so deep, the young ones aren't going to be able to crawl out. But I have to caution you on these nest bowls. They are made of plastic. They're shiny and they're slippery. So there's a problem sometimes with baby pigeons called splayed leg. That's where a baby is heavy and is trying to stand up, and the legs aren't developed yet, and the leg will slide right out from under them because of the slipperiness of this. So you have to be very cautious with that. You want very thick nesting material, but what I suggest you do, go to a hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's, something, whatever, a local hardware store. They sell an aerosol spray can to make a step non-skid. You spray it and it's granular, so that if you have a step where it's icy sometimes or wet and it's slippery, you spray it on and it allows you to step down and have a grip. Same thing here. Spray the bottom of this with that non-skid material, and it'll allow the pigeon's toes to grab and hold up, and you won't have that splayed wing problem. If you don't know what splayed wing is, it's where a bird stands up, one leg slides out, sometimes two, but usually one, and within 8 hours, if you haven't caught that bird is growing so fast, in 8 hours, it's over. That bird's leg will be in that position for the rest of its life, unless you somehow can figure out how to. Some people do tie the leg to the bottom of their body and they're able to save it, but in most cases you're going to be too late. So USA Plastic Nest Bowl features advantage. The features are sturdy, won't move, very deep. Okay, and all of these of course are in stock at Foys.
Next one will be the clay nest bowl.
Okay, this is the one that I use in 90-95% of the time. I like it because it's heavy. Birds can perch here, won't move. It has the 4 vent holes in the bottom which allow airflow. It's deep enough so that the birds in most cases won't be able to escape. What you have to do with something like this, because it doesn't look smooth, but it looks smooth, but isn't, because the bird being clay can actually grip to it, but you still have to use the material. I use these, as I say, in almost all of my lofts. And what I do, in fact, I've been doing it the last month. It takes me, I got 13 sections, so it takes me a long time to clean each one. But what I do with these is I scrape all of the droppings that have built up over the breeding season, and after I've done that, I knock it like that. And then I have 2 big pans, and I fill them with water that goes just above this, and I let them set overnight. By the next day, I dump the dirty water out. I take each of these bowls and I'll have a rag, I'll wipe them off and I get all the droppings that might still be there and dry it, and I put it away until next breeding season. I love them. They have the only big disadvantage, I suppose, is they are very fragile. And if you drop one, you've lost one. So you've got to be careful with them. But as I say, I use them all the time. They're made in Europe, so being very heavy, you can imagine cost-wise, they're a little bit pricey because we have to have them packed in Germany or in Belgium, and then they ship them to us by boat. We get them, we have to pack them, and we can't pack them the way we normally do. 6 go in a box, but we have to use special packing materials to prevent them from breaking. It took us a couple of years to figure out how to do it, but we now know we put them like this, put material in between, put another one, put material in between, put material all the way around. So part of the cost is the fact that we can't take a bowl like this and put it in the box and pretty much ship it. These have to be packed very carefully. Great bowl.
Next one is the plastic weave bowl. There's 2 different sizes.
If you have a question as we're going through these, please send a question to us. Or maybe you have a question about a bowl that I haven't answered, so I encourage you to send them. This is the weave bowl. As you can see, 2 sizes. This will fit almost any breed from the racing homer to even the show kings, the bigger birds. So it is big enough. This one is smaller. It's made for the small breeds such as helmets, rollers, tipplers, small breeds. Advantage, maximum ventilation, of course. You can see you're getting lots and lots of airflow. Airflow is important in that it helps keep the birds dry and helps keep the nest a little bit cooler, but you cannot, and it has the vents here to allow air to come up. But that being said, we'll be talking about nest bowls, but you cannot use this nest bowl by itself because it's so obvious that a baby could stick its legs through one of these partitions, little holes, going to get caught and do some damage. So you've got to use either a lot of straw, you've got to use tobacco stems, or you've got to use a nest pad. A nest pad fits in like this. Just push it down. Some people glue them. Some people run a nail right straight through it so it won't move. But this makes for a perfect nest bowl, so to speak. You've got the softness, you've got the grip, and these are removable. Throw them away, clean them when you're all done. If you want, they can be put in a washing machine to wash them, dry them, hold them for next year, and then you can just put them right back in. So we do have the nest bowl, the nest pads for the smaller size too. But don't buy this and think you can use it by itself. It takes a companion product such as a nest pad, or you've got to use straw, tobacco stem, something to block all of these holes. I strongly recommend the nest pad. While I'm thinking about it, a few years ago, and we might talk about this again, people were using these in the plastic nest bowls, and what they were doing was cutting up old carpet pad, the pad that goes underneath the carpet, and it seemed to work great. Then it wasn't very long, within a year, there was a major problem because nobody realized or nobody thought it through, or maybe a few did and didn't do it, but there's formaldehyde inside carpeting pad. It's a chemical, and pigeons were mysteriously dying when people used nest pads because of the chemicals that are in the nest pad. So don't be tempted if you're driving by and you see some nest pads along, some carpet pads along the side of the road, or somebody's giving them away. Don't be tempted. Don't use them. Okay, that's the plastic weave.
Yep. Next ones are the European plastic nest bowls.
Okay, and folks, I don't want to sound like I'm braggadocious, but Foys has the largest assortment of nest bowls in the United States. No company, nobody sells the assortment we do. And we have a good reason for that, just like there's two sizes, because everybody has a different idea of what they want to use in a nest bowl, and different breeds. So we try to give you the maximum amount of options so that you can make an intelligent choice. I know I have my favorite, but there isn't one here that I haven't used one time or another. So we try to offer you many, many options. This is a clever one. I like it. Lightweight. Here again, look at all the vent holes it has. Allows air. You can put a nest pad in it in both sizes. But in this particular case, you do not need a nest pad if you choose not to use them because it's ridged. I don't know whether you can see it on in the camera, but you can hear it. There are ridges here which allow the baby bird to grasp, so you're going to have less of an issue. Same thing with this. You can hear it. So there are ridges in here, and what's going to happen is if you have a baby, you're still going to use nesting material, whether it's tobacco stems or straw or whatever you're using, but the birds have the opportunity to grip. Lots of ventilation. Am I driving you crazy with that sound? I'm a tease. All right, so come in two sizes. A heavier plastic allows ventilation, won't move. Plastic nest bowls, two sizes. Almost every one of these so far, with the exception of one, are made overseas. We get these from Poland, and we also get them from Belgium. The USA plastic, made in USA to the best of my knowledge. The clay, made in Belgium. The weave plastic, made in Belgium, made in China, made in Poland, and so I wish we could buy these in America because people ask us about that. The problem is the market isn't big enough. Pigeons are a small industry. We've tried so many times to buy American and we haven't been able to do it. So we do import them. Now the next one we're going to talk about, most of you have never seen before. It's not in our catalog, but as of now it is on our website. When I was very young, and I'm talking about 50 years ago or young or older, we had a product called Save a Day NestBowl. They were made in America for years and years and years. Then the manufacturer decided it wasn't a big enough market, even though they were selling hundreds of thousands of them. They wanted to sell millions, so they discontinued. The market then went to Canada, and they were made in Canada for years. But what happened, and I'm not sure whether it was the Canadian ones or the American ones, it was found that they were making dog dish bowls. That's what these are. Actually, not these, but they were dog dish bowls. The Save-A-Days were, and they were putting chemicals in them that evidently didn't affect the dogs at all, but it was killing pigeons. They were white. And I'm not an expert on it. To the best of my knowledge, I know there were chemicals. It was killing the baby pigeons, and I believe in order to make them white, they were bleaching them, and there was chemicals in that bleach. Talk for a second. I got a cough.
Okay. If you look in our catalog, you'll see the Dandy NestBowls, which are the paper pulp NestBowls. We got those to replace the old sanitary NestBowls that we had to do away with. So when you see those in the catalog, we no longer carry the Dandy NestBowls. We sold them all, and we went to these newer ones that we had made. And
I'm sorry, I knew it was coming. Thank you. Yeah, what happened was a gentleman from Canada called me and said, "Jerry, are you interested in having some NestBowls that are exactly the same as the old Save-A-Day?" I said, "Well, sure, I'm interested, but tell me more." I wanted to make sure they weren't being used or made the same way the old ones were. Turns out he had found a company in Canada that could supply them, but actually, turns out it wasn't a Canadian company. They were actually coming out of China. So we contacted the company because China wouldn't deal with us directly, and we were informed that yes, we could have them made, but first we had to pay for a mold. We had a $4,000 plus investment just making a mold. Then the next step was they made some for us and sent a stock to us for us to look at, and we looked at it, and they weren't perfect in our mind, so we sent back some suggestions. They did change the formula to make them, and this is the result. If you remember the Save-A-Day NestBowls, or if you have them, this is the exact size. I looked at some of the old ones, and these are exactly the same size. They won't tip. They are deep enough. The ones we were selling, what did we call them? What did they call them? The ones we were selling that we discontinued? Dandy NestBowls had 4 big holes for ventilation, which is fine, but they also had a bump here so that the eggs were rolling to the side, or if you didn't have enough nesting material, that bump caused the little babies to crawl to the edge when they couldn't crawl back in. The Dandy NestBowls also had big ventilation holes. We don't need a ventilation hole on these because, number one, they're disposable. It's not something you're going to reuse. The other reason is this part basically sits on the floor of the nest box. So if you did put holes in the bottom, it would be useless because no ventilation would be able to get under here. The main thing is they are throwaways. You can use them once or twice and throw them away. To the best of my knowledge, we're the only people in the United States. We are working with other suppliers right now that are interested in stocking them also. But we had to order 250,000. We ordered 250,000 of these. That's the only way we could place an order. The company wouldn't take an order smaller. So if you're interested, we now have them. We're proud to say that they're exactly the same, but you'll notice they're not white. Reason for that, I told them I want it natural as natural can be. All these are ground up paper, soaked in water, and then dried. So it's paper and water, nothing else. Paper and water. And you might remember it as paper mache. I think that's what they call it. And it has a rough surface. Even if you didn't have nesting material in here, the birds can grip it. Hear that? So, we have them in stock. We hope you'll take advantage. You can buy them in various numbers. The more you buy, the less expensive they are per unit. Now,
hold up.
Yep.
I have a comment about the new sanitary NestBowls. When we first posted them on our Facebook page, I just want to thank everybody for the positive comments and for thanking us for getting that product for you. And we did have a few naysayers, but just know that these are the new NestBowls. They're not the same as the old. It's water and paper. That's it. So you can feel comfortable using them and it won't hurt your pigeons.
We're not complaining, but it was quite an investment. We figure at best we've got a 10-year supply, but the good thing is they never go bad, and if you keep them dry. So anyway, that's the nest bowl. Now, this is another nest bowl, to the best of my knowledge. Only ones in the United States that sell them. These are made in Poland. They come in two sizes. I can't show you weight, but I can assure you these are very heavy. This is much heavier than the clay bowl, which up until these were the heaviest bowl we sold. They cannot be moved by a pigeon, period. They're deep. You should use a nest pad. Goes in there like that. Being very, very heavy, people love them. They are unbreakable, very, very easy to clean. You can clean them like I clean my nest bowl. But the big advantage is, of course, the size. Look at how big this is as compared to this. Or if you can imagine, the only parts you're using on the Save-A-Day is this part. It fits right in there, how much smaller it is. This is for almost all standard sized birds. If you've got the big birds, the kings, the runts, the English carriers, the big breeds, this is what you need. Bigger breed can move them. These can move the lighter weight ones. They're not going to move this. You can imagine a show king trying to build a nest in there, just won't work. So if you've got a big breed, this is what you want. If you have a smaller breed, even this is a little bit bigger than this one, but it's ideal, perfect, easy to clean. Love these things. Should I go on?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Continue.
This, I'll show you this one. This is a,
Open it.
pardon?
Hand me that. I'll open
Okay, you'll open it. This is a Belgium nest bowl. It's called all plastic. Got the vent holes. This one doesn't sound as strong. This has got a lot of little dimples all through it, so that the birds will have a grip. I strongly suggest nesting material with this or a nest pad. And they're actually, people say, well, geez, they look so small. But they're really not. Look at this. They're actually bigger than this, bigger than this. So you've got a pretty darn good sized bowl, fit anything up to and including a racing homer or a little bit bigger, something like a Lahore. Unbreakable, easy to clean, real solid. They're not thin. You can't bend these. That's the Belgium nest bowl. All right, and the last one, we're going to talk about this particular bowl. Here again, it took me 3 years to convince the company in Poland to make these, because if you're familiar with Europe, they have a whole different electrical system, and their plugs are different than the USA plugs. So in order for us to buy them, they had to send them to a factory to have their plug taken off or not put on at all, and then an American plug made in Europe, in Poland specifically, that would allow us to use them here in America. What it is a heated nest bowl. Now, you may not want to put these in every one of your nest boxes, but all of us have a special pair that maybe we want to start breeding a little early, and we want to do everything we can to keep the babies warm. Well, with this, hi, our FedEx man is here to pick up. With this, it doesn't get hot, it gets warm. It's controlled temperature. You can't adjust it, but it is a controlled temperature and is not going to get too hot to bother the birds. But maybe for those few pair that you want to take special care and breed earlier, or even breed later into the early in the spring, it'll keep the birds warm. Comes in 2 sizes. The size, I won't take it out.
Same as the heavy nest ball.
It is a heavy nest ball. Very, very heavy, won't move, easy to clean, and as I say, it's not meant for everybody. It's made for those special birds. These are 3 for $50. They're not terribly expensive, but they're certainly not cheap. So if you've got 3 birds, 6 birds, pairs that you want to take special care, make sure that they stay warm in the cold season, because especially in the spring, you know how in March it can be 50 or 60 degrees or 70 degrees in March, but then in the evening it goes down to freezing. So this is going to protect those birds from that sudden swing of temperature. Okay, that's all the nest bowls we're going to be talking about. Is that correct?
Yes.
Should we take a question?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a team of 15 young birds that I've been letting out for about a month. 11 of them have been starting the routing process and going away for an hour. The other 4 will fly with them for the first 5 or 10 minutes, then come in. What can I do to get them up to par with the other ones? They're not going to be raced. This is strictly for hobby purposes.
Okay. I've had the same problem in my birds. I've got a white bird team that starting to train. We do the funerals and weddings, and we need a second team. I have exactly the same problem. You always are going to have that problem. And what I do is I do everything I can to keep them flying as long as I can. Some people use a long pole, similar to what, if you have a deep swimming pool, they have this long pole that's used to clean the bottom of the pole. You need a long, long pole like that, and you put a flag or something bright on the end of it, and it's called flagging. So when they're up in the air, you're moving that flag around. The birds see it, they're a little nervous, and they keep on flying. You can throw a ball at them. You can throw something up in the air at them. You can holler at them, clap, do everything you can to keep all of them flying. But there's always going to be some that are just plain lazy. So with the team that I've got, I'm going to start tomorrow to train them to the basket. So even the lazy birds will go in the basket, and I'll teach them to come in or to come out of the basket maybe half a dozen times. You can do it in a day or 2 days. You put the birds in, you walk in front of your loft 10, 20 yards, whatever it is. You open the door, and they'll start walking out. I tap the top of the basket. That teaches them to walk out. After 3 or 4 times, or 3 or 4, however long it takes you to do it, you'll see as soon as you drop that door down, the birds come out and fly right to the loft. You're going to do it with even those lazy birds, and then you're going to train them, and maybe you're going to take them 100 yards, 200 yards, but you're going to include those lazy birds. And then the next step might be 5 miles, and then 20 miles or 10 miles, whatever you decide to do. The lazy birds are going to learn. They're either going to be learned or going to be lost. Nothing else you can do about it. And in almost all cases, those lazy birds will learn. They'll fly with the rest of their team, and you'll be surprised if you've got them marked or know one from another. Some of those lazy birds are going to be some of your best birds. You've just got to keep them trained and train them to come home that way, and send them with the birds that are willing to fly. That it on that one?
Good job.
I don't know why I'm so dry today. I just realized you're still making me do all the talking. Where'd you go on your vacation?
Myrtle Beach.
And you went to the shore
I did.
with some kids. How many kids do you have?
3.
A lot of people don't realize that. And look how young she looks. She's how many grandchildren do you have? 2 grandchildren. So
How many grandchildren do you have?
27.
How many great-grandchildren do you have?
14 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
Yeah. Love kids. You know
And
that.
how many kids do you have?
I had 8 on one pass, so I have 7.
Still
And
have 8
all of
kids.
them are named Gagne. All right. I'll go mention a couple of things. I've got some things, unless you want to interrupt
Go
me,
ahead.
please do whatever you have. Gromus called me yesterday. Gromus is a close friend. He co-hosts the show on occasion. He said, Jerry, I got a weird one for you. He said, I've got a bird that its chest is blown up like a balloon. And I started to answer him because I knew what it was. He says, no, it's not what you think it is. He says, what's weird about this is only half of the air sac, the chest, is blown up. The other side's normal, but only half is blown up. Well, he blew my mind, so to speak. I've never heard of that one. And we discussed it back and forth, what to do. I told him what I would suggest you do is get yourself a syringe with a needle, stick that needle into the chest area that's blown up. Make sure when you stick it in, the plunger of the syringe is all the way down, not out. Because if you stick it into the chest and the syringe plunger is out, you're going to be pushing it. And you're not taking air out, you're pushing air in. So make sure the plunger's in, and then gently pull back, and you're going to be removing the air. The other way to do it, because I'm treating it the same way whether it was half full or all full, the other way is to get a very sharp knife or razor blade. You cut a little hole, a slit, just maybe a 1/4 of an inch long, just below the skin, and you gently massage, and the air will come out. Now, in both cases, you may have to do it 2 or 3 or 4 times, because what you've got is a hole in the air sac that when the bird breathes out, some of the air is going through that little hole in the air sac, and it's being captured in the chest cavity. So that's kind of what you do. Grama says, what? He said, I did massage it, and the air came out, but the next day it was there again. So same thing. You might have to do it 2 or 3 times because the cut has to heal. Okay, that was Grama's question. Now, if you don't have anything in particular. Breeding season is pretty much over for all of us. I know there are people in warmer climates who might breed even longer, but it's almost August. I'm completely done breeding, and I'm in the process of separating my hens and cocks. Good time. What I wanted to mention about breeding season is a couple of things you should consider. As most of you know, I have 13 sections, so I'm looking to do everything I possibly can to reduce the time and the work. So when I am separating my cocks, I always have I want an empty section. And this time of the year, I've reduced the numbers, so I have 2 empty sections. I take all of let's say I'm in section 1. I take all of the birds out of section 1, hen and cock, and put them into one of the empty sections. Now the loft is empty, and I can go to it. I use floor covering called Belgian floor covering, and it's been down almost 6 months. I shovel it all out. In fact, I give it to a gardener who uses it for raising asparagus. I think I've shared that with you before. So now I've got a bare floor. Before I have a bare floor and before I remove the floor covering, what I do is scrape every area, all the perches, anywhere that a bird might land, and that's on the floor. And then I pick everything up, put it in boxes, and take it out, and I've got a nice clean floor. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the floor with Belgium white. Belgium white is ground up chalk. It's powder. Very, very absorbent. So I spread that on the floor, the bare floor. I have wood floors. And then I'm going to cover that floor with about 3 inches of Belgium floor covering, which is ground up clay, and it has an anti-coccidiosis product in it, but very absorbent, and it collects moisture. So now I've got my floor covered completely, my loft is clean, and I go to the where it was an empty section, and I take either the cocks or the hens, and I put them in that section, which is ready. Now let's say I have 2 empty sections, or if you're going to do this in a day, just take the birds and put them in a basket and let them sit until you're done. So I just keep repeating the process, hens, cock, and now I've got everybody separated the way I want. And with this time of the year, when you've got everything separated, everything cleaned, it's a good time to consider vaccinating your birds, because it's a process that takes 2 or 3 weeks, so you want to vaccinate your birds before you ever consider breeding again. Or you may want, something I believe in, is I don't use antibiotics, but I do treat the birds with a product called 3-in-1. Of course, we sell it, as do a lot of other supply companies. There's no antibiotic in it, but if the birds happen to have canker, coccidiosis, or worms, it's going to take care of that issue. So this is the time you want to do it, when you're not breeding and you have no young in the nest. If you have a history of salmonella, or a history, another word for salmonella is paratyphoid, or if you have a long history of respiratory issues, this is another good time to treat with furazolidone against paratyphoid before you vaccinate. Or if you've had respiratory issues, you may want to consider something like Spiridox or doxycycline or Tylodox, something like that. What you want to do is combine it with something called bromhexine. Bromhexine will make the product work even better. But now, even though the birds all appear to be healthy, I'm talking about if you've never had an issue with salmonella, never had an issue with paratyphoid or respiratory, don't worry about it. But if you had problems in the past, now is the time to treat the birds to try to prevent that problem from happening. Should we move in, or should I keep blabbering?
We have a question.
Okay.
What is the best time to turn birds out?
Turn birds out in that you starting to train them. What you're going to do, first of all, of course, they have to be completely weaned, and if you're thinking about turning them out, they are completely weaned. The other suggestion would be if you're not sure they're old enough to be weaned, said this many times, turn them upside down, and what you're going to do is look. Their feathers should be completely grown in underneath, and if you can't see skin, they're old enough. Now, what you're going to do, the first step is you've got to have an aviary outside with a removable aviary cover. I use a screened-in a box, so to speak, that's screened in, and my trap is installed. So what I do from the very beginning after they're weaned is I catch them, and if you want to spend some time with your babies, perfect time to calm them down, train them, blow a whistle every time you feed them, and just feed them a little bit. Eventually they'll eat right out of your hands. So with the tamed down birds, you're going to pick them up gently, and you're going to put them outside with the trap open, just completely open. Put them all outside, and they'll figure out how to come back in. They're hungry, I put some feed in, they're going to come back in. I do this maybe for 2 days. Then I do the process again the 3rd or 4th day. I drop the bobs on the trap. They're outside. There's no way for them to get in. They look at it as jail bars. They're not sure what to do. But if they're hungry, most of them are going to figure out how to get in. Some are not. Some are going to spend the night out there. It won't hurt them. And the next day you're going to do the same thing. Eventually they're all going to figure out how to come through the bobs. If you haven't trained them to come in through those bobs, you can't let them out. So let's say I've done this 10 days to 2 weeks. Now it's time to let them out. So in answer to your question, and I know it's a long answer, but there's steps to go before you let them out. So from the day they're weaned until they're actually flying them or letting them fly, 3 weeks, something in that area. And when you remove that aviary, don't scare them up, but do know they're going to be on the roofs. I've said it before, on the roofs, in the trees, on the ground, all over the place. Some aren't even going to want to fly. And it's going to take a week or 2 for them to learn that they can fly. So now you've got them flying around in circles. You're The goal is to hope they'll what we call trip. Trip just means they disappear. When they disappear and you don't see them for half an hour or an hour, they've taken a trip, they've come back. Now it's time to start training them to the basket and training them down the road. If you really want a detailed description, we sell a book called White Pigeons, The Color of Money. It details how to do this. So in answer to your question, to let them out is somewhere around 3 weeks. Actually, letting them fly is something like 5 or 6 weeks, something in that area. It does take time, does take patience. Never scare them out. Just if you scare them out, they may get up and never come back. Hope I answered that one.
Good job.
Well, thank you. What it is you folks don't know. I've got a screen up there that Veronica gives me all the answers. She's smarter than me. No, not really. Another question or something else?
Another question.
Okay.
I keep getting contradicting information about using barley in my seed mix. What is your opinion on using barley for pigeons?
I think if you've used barley with your pigeons, you know they don't like it. Barley is a cleansing seed in that it's going to help clean their intestinal tract. Most people who race pigeons know that those pigeons have been mixed up with other pigeons when they were shipped, or if they're shipping birds for a show and they've got maybe 2 or 3 other guys shipping with them. After a race or after a show, it's not a bad idea and you want them hungry because they won't eat it at first. And if they don't eat it at first, leave it there. They have to eat it. So you feed nothing but barley, and it's a cleansing product, a cleansing seed, and give it to them for like 3 days and nothing else but barley. Won't hurt them, but the first day they don't like it, won't eat much, but after the second or third day they'll accept it. But as far as using it in a seed, some in a mixed grain, some companies do use it. I see no use for it in a mixed grain feed. And I know that I might disagree with some of the other folks, but you asked my opinion, and that's my opinion. Okay.
You don't sell tipplers anymore, do you?
No, I don't.
No.
I don't sell tipplers, but don't hesitate to call me about tipplers. When I did sell tipplers, I had 3 breeders who bred them for me and shipped them to me. And if you're interested in tipplers, you call me, and I'll give you 2 or 3 phone numbers that you can contact people. And these were quality breeders. I'm not just going to give you anybody's name. These were people who fly their tipplers, not show tipplers, flying tipplers. And if you've got a pencil, we'll skip a little, give you a little bit more information, and I'm going to give you my home phone number to call me, and I'll be glad to answer your questions. As I've said many times, I'll give it to you freely. Don't take advantage of it. Last night, people were calling me at 8:30 in the evening. Sometimes they're from California, maybe it's only 5:30 there. I try not to answer the phone after 5 o'clock Eastern time. We even have flyers out in California when I've got calls at midnight. So I've learned to shut the phone off later, but if you're going to call me, I don't answer before 9. I try not to answer after 5 unless I've specifically asked somebody to call me in the evening and I think it's important enough to answer their question. Oh, let me give my number out. Have they had enough time? Okay. My home phone, 724-359-5355. Area code 724-359-5355. If you call it right now, I'm not home. Okay.
Okay, nest pads.
Okay.
Belgium nest pad.
We've talked about the NestBowls. We're going to talk about the nest pads. Nest pads are made of 2 fibers. This one is felt, and we also sell one that is all natural. These are all natural. They're felt. And these are made out of coconut husk. One is very, very smooth. One is a little bit rougher surface. You can use the rough surface or you can use a fairly smooth surface. But I will tell you, birds get a good grip on this as they do this. They can be washed and used a few times, but be aware the babies with their claws are going to eventually pull some of this loose. So when they start doing that, it's still usable, but if they get down to where you can see through them, you're going to have to get rid of them. True on both of them, both all natural. You can use them in just about any size nest bowl. We have them in 2 sizes. Do we still have the felt? We have them in 3 sizes.
The felt ones are only in 1 size. The coconut are in 3 sizes.
Well, these are the coconut, so we have those in 3 different sizes. Small birds, medium birds, large birds. That being said, we also cater to the cage bird people, the canaries, parakeets, and things like that. And we have nest pads and nest bowls, which we didn't talk about, but they are in our catalog. If you have canaries or parakeets, we have those also. I think they're probably impossible to find in most pet stores. Went through that pretty quick, didn't we? Okay.
And we also have the tobacco stems.
Okay. I'm going to, it is open.
It's open.
Ooh. These tobacco stems come out of Belgium. I'm not sure where the tobacco is grown in Belgium. I think they're grown in other places and shipped to them. But we bring them in, and these just came in recently, and they're heavy. But
they stink.
Pardon?
And they stink.
And they smell like tobacco. But I wanted to tell you, if you get these, over time they do become lighter because the moisture content in the tobacco stem dries up. So what I tell people when you're doing tobacco stems, and I'll open up a box and show you, this is what they look like. As you can see, they're sticks and they're brittle. See, you broke it right in half. And what I do with tobacco stems, or what I suggest to people to do, is get yourself, if you know you're going to put your tobacco stems in tomorrow, you're not going to put them in this way. What you want to do is put them in a 5-gallon bucket of water, doesn't have to be full depending on how many you use, and let it soak a few hours overnight. Then when you take them out of the water, they're going to be very soft and pliable, depending on the size of the nest bowl that you have. And I apologize because Veronica gives me heck about this all the time. Instead of looking at you, I'm looking at me up here. I'm supposed to look at you.
I was just going to say that.
So what you want to do is you put them in the water, and then you form the nest in a circle to fit whatever size nest bowl you have. When they're wet, they're not in the nest box, or they're wet, you put them in there, and you wait an hour or 2, and they're going to be completely dry, and they're going to be formed to that particular nest bowl. And people want to know what's the advantage of these. Well, just like cigarettes have nicotine in them, these are the stems. The leaves grow on here. This is the stem of a tobacco plant. Well, there's nicotine in here too. Won't hurt the birds, but the advantage, and so many people use them, is the nicotine kills bugs that might accumulate in the nest bowl. All of us have picked up young ones and seen bugs in the nest bowl. Well, this will kill them. The nicotine kills the bugs in the nest bowl. Put them in water, soften them, shape them to the nest bowl that you want to use, and put them in the nest bowl, let them dry, and you've got an excellent nesting material. Some of the other nesting materials that people use, I'll smoke for a while. Hay is bad. Gets wet, stays damp. Sand next to stems, probably the best product that you can use. When I say sand, go to Home Depot, Lowe's, hardware store, and buy a 50-pound bag of children's play sand. The reason I recommend that is it's perfectly safe. The sand is made to be used by children. There's no chemical, nothing harsh in it. So you're thinking about your baby pigeons and how delicate they are there. You put a little bit of sand. Now, if they have holes, common sense says you're going to have to block these holes. And all you do is get some 3-inch not masking tape. What's the name of the other tape? Duct tape or Gorilla tape. And you can tape the bottom. It'll hold the sand. And one of the advantages of sand, it holds body heat. So if you've got 2 or 3 inches of sand in here and the eggs are in here, the bird warms the sand as well as the eggs. And if the bird leaves the nest bowl, the eggs are here, the sand traps the heat for a little while, and it'll keep the eggs at a higher temperature than if you didn't have the sand in there. No other product does that. So in terms of product, tobacco stems and sand are the best that you can use. I've used straw, it's fine, but it does hold moisture and you've got to clean that out with straw fairly frequently. Did I miss anything?
Pine needles?
Pine needles. I wish I could obtain pine needles. I'd like to try them out, put them on the floor. A lot of people in the South do use long-stemmed or short-stemmed pine needles. They're very soft. There are some supply companies in Florida and other places that do sell them by the bale, but they're usable. You can form your nest with them, throw them on the floor. The pigeons just love to spend a little bit of time picking them up and bringing them to the hen so they can build their own nest. But don't expect the birds to build a nest that's satisfactory. A lot of pigeons are lazy. The pair will build a shallow nest. Some will build a nest so that it's flowing over. But just make sure there's enough nesting material in there, not a real thin layer. So pine needles are great. They're not hollow like straw. Straw being hollow, sometimes the bugs can live inside the hollow straw. Pine needle is solid, so you won't have that issue. I can't believe we've talked this long.
Interesting.
It's almost 4 o'clock, and we've just talked about nesting material. Pardon?
I told you.
Oh, okay. We can go overtime too, right?
Right.
So if you're watching us, it doesn't. Veronica has the master switch, and she. Oh, and I have to look over here. And she has the master switch, and she can cut us off at any time, but she won't if we're in the middle of a question. Do we have a question?
We do. My birds won't eat wheat.
You're feeding them too much. Simple as that. Simple as that. There's wheat in all of my pigeon feed, and if you overfeed, if you put more in there than they're going to eat in an hour or so or less, they're going to eat what they want first. So when I feed my birds, I've got it down pretty much to a science. I know how many birds are in there. I know how long it takes to feed them, or for them to eat what I put in front of them. But if I'm lazy, or I'll give you an example, when I'm gone, I have other folks that feed them, and they'll tell me the same thing. They don't eat all their feed. And I tell them, and they've learned, that you're feeding them too much. Just keep cutting back on the feed until everything in that feeder is gone. If you don't do it, you're going to have the same issue. If there's wheat in there when I go back, I put the wheat back into the grain, and tomorrow I'll cut back again. So it's an easy answer. You're feeding too much. Wheat is good for them. They don't like it. Much similar to barley, but they will eat it.
Okay.
We never got to that question about the respiratory.
No.
We'll save it for another day.
Yes.
Well, we remind you, if you have any questions, you have my phone number. But if I don't answer, I've told you this many times, everybody in my company, all of my family, and Sam and Sherry can answer almost all of your questions. It's a shame, because they're women, a lot of you guys are prejudiced or sexist and will not take their answers. They've been trained by me, but they've also been trained under fire, so to speak. We get a lot of questions every day. Every one of the girls have a book, it's called Health Book, that we have written, me and also the girls have added, like the questions you've heard me ask or answer today. They're in that book. So take faith, be faithful with these girls, or trusting, I suppose is a better word. They know what they're talking about, and they will tell you. If they don't have an answer, they'll tell you, call Jerry. But 90% of the questions after 18 or 19 years of hearing question after question, the girls know the answer.
Absolutely.
Okay, next week we're going to have an auction.
No, August 10th.
I'm sorry, 2 weeks from now we will have this regular show, be 1 hour, and then we'll take a 5-minute break, and then the show will continue, but it won't be the show. It'll be auctioning off some quality birds, and we will have some quality birds for you in a couple of weeks. Have a question, email it to Gina or myself at Foys, and we'll save them for next week. Once again, thanks for listening. Go ahead.
Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend. Thank you very much.